publisher of Yankee News, coming to you from, once again, the world-famous Parkway Diner on this Monday, July 14th, the year of our Lord 2025. So, yeah, first of all, calls to action. Go to our website, Yankee News, like, view, subscribe, tell your friends, but above all, subscribe. We are still trying to get to 1,000. It's been a real fight to get there, so help us out. Tell Tong time. Go ahead. Keep yelling. And Tina Peters, well, we're still waiting. I'm going to review an old piece of information, but I can assure you that old piece of information will come to surface soon because Ms. Griswold will be in court soon if she isn't already. Okay, the theme. I want to start with the theme. The theme is Nuremberg 2.0 has begun. Now, last week we've been treated to all the conflict around the Epstein files. And now we see, the heat is beginning to build again in Ukraine. So these are important issues. Meantime, in the background, because the press is not covering it, we have an event taking place in the town of Leeuwarden in the Netherlands. In that courtroom, a trial has begun, and it involves COVID. It involves the vaccines that were manufactured by Pfizer for COVID. So it's a serious case because what you have is a group of people as the plaintiffs who include a number of whistleblowers and others who have something to say on the subject, and the defendants. This is where it gets interesting. The defendants are names you and I know and love. Alex Bourla, CEO of Pfizer, is a defendant. Mark Rutte, former Dutch Prime Minister, is a defendant. Ursula von der Leyen, head of the EU Commission, is a defendant. It gets better. Bill Gates is a defendant, and Klaus Schwab is a defendant, and I'm sure there'll be a few others. So this group has submitted about 200 pieces of evidence to the judge, and so this trial will take several weeks, it is believed, and the estimate is that in 6 weeks the judge will render an opinion, a ruling on this. So, a lot of people have been wanting this for a long time. And let me just point out that the reference to the term Nuremberg 2.0 is also a reference to a subject we haven't really talked about enough, and that is called informed consent. So what has happened is in the last 5 years, there's been a lot of backsliding on what constitutes informed consent. Hopefully now that President Trump is in office, we can fix some of the mistakes that have been made by this backsliding on informed consent. But I wish to remind the audience that there's a historical basis for the concept of informed consent. After World War II, when the horrors of the medical experiments perpetrated on Jews in the death camps came to light, it was decided that never again should humans be subjected to medical treatments that are against their will and without their knowledge. So that is the basis, but we have forgotten. So now, hopefully with this trial, and we'll get it back around to a more healthy and robust discussion about it, yeah, we'll do a better job. Meantime, let's see here, what's the other thing? Okay, I want to quickly move on to the situation with Ukraine. All right. At this point, President Trump has finally decided, you know what, I cannot take Putin at his word at all. So now he's turning to helping Ukraine. And I need to remind you folks that back in March and April, President Trump really seemed to be down on Ukraine, and he was really favoring Putin, all in an effort to build trust and rapport with Putin. Well, how did that work out? Not very well. So we're left with some other puzzling problems here. All right, so just a quick summary. The fight right now is over how to supply Ukraine with more missiles. Again, America's under pressure because we have not, as far as I know, ramped up the production of the HIMARS missiles and others. And now we're faced with having to figure out how to do that. And then it's like, well, do we pass this to members of NATO and then they pass it to Ukraine just to get into that system, or they just give them to Ukraine? Seems kind of like a silly argument to me, but this is what's being discussed. But how do I want to handle this? All right, it's important. I'll start with this. All you fans of Jack Posobiec and Steve Bannon will know that from time to time when they talk about Ukraine and Russia, the real prize in their eyes is Odessa, the port of Odessa. So in other words, it's in Russia's economic interest to be able to control that coastline of what is currently Ukraine, with Odessa being the center point for this whole thing. So this raises a number of questions in my mind. What will Russia do if they never get Odessa? Will they engage in other activities? I mean, there's an argument to be made as to whether or not Russia has really suffered without the benefit of having Odessa. And I think if it's all about Odessa, it's entirely possible to work out some kind of arrangement if that can bring about a ceasefire. But it may just be that Russia has, or Putin has, other ideas in mind besides just having Odessa, which then leads us to a very difficult question with military implications. If they're going to keep fighting, and by the way, I'll remind you that Russia, like China, has put their economy on what they call a wartime footing. So in other words, they're operating in a manner much like the United States did during World War II. And I think it's a fair question as to how much they can sustain that, but this is the decision they have made. Will America have to go on a war footing as well? Then all of a sudden, you might as well be talking about World War III, as far as I'm concerned. But as Steve Bannon and others have pointed out, all these kinds of decisions, bit by bit, are dragging us into World War III in a part of the world that can only fairly be described as evil and cursed. We really want no part of it, and if there's any way to stop what's going on there, that is the more desirable solution. All right, so that's my comments for now on Ukraine and Russia. I want to quickly jump to this person who continues to be a problem for people. We haven't heard enough here about the background of Mr. Zoran Mamdani, okay? So here he is, the so-called Democrat socialist who's won the Democrat primary for mayor of New York City. And he said a lot of obnoxious things, and one of which is there should be no billionaires. Well, as this article, which is posted, says there's 123 billionaires living in New York City. Well, let's just, rather than just talking about the billionaires, let's just talk about those who are particularly wealthy. They're all going to be confronted with the same problem. And if you add to that all his talk about what he wants to do, housing in New York City, all the people who own buildings in New York City are going to have a big problem. It is a huge mess, or can be, and I don't know how it's going to get resolved. But I think what we're confronted with is the push to get more voters to understand the implications of what it really means to vote for Mamdani. And mind you, the people who are behind Mamdani will do anything. Okay, so what did we find out just the other day, for example? I think I sent it to you, Eric. It was that there's a so-called group called Jews for Mamdani. There's just one problem. The person who founded and runs the Jews for Mamdani is not a Jew. He is a Marxist. I believe he's from Africa. There's some other attributes where it shows that he's anything but Jewish. Yet he is pushing this theme. And the problem is he's got a number of Jewish people in New York City who can't figure out that you've got a person here who's an anti-Semite. Why? Anyway. Okay, so that's up there. And then there was another piece I put up. An Arab commentator, Zoran Mamdani, is a radical Islamist, as said by, where's the gentleman's name? Oh, come on. Dabaibe, okay? And so, I mean, he basically echoes a lot of the things that have already been said, but it's worth seeing, all right? So problem I'm having right now is the way this is still rolling here in mid-July, July 14th, is that the kind of pushback that I would expect to see against Mamdani so far is not happening. And that is a concern. Now, I want to take some time. I really need to talk about it, right? We know we've got to do it. Yes, Jeffrey Epstein. So I put up 3 articles here. Mike Benz, Mike Flynn, and who's the third one? Carolyn Graham? Yeah, Carolyn Graham. Okay, the thing to think about with respect to these articles is that there is such a history. There is such an unbelievable, fact-filled history for Jeffrey Epstein and what he's done. So in the case of the Mike Benz article, he goes back to the 80s, and what he makes a very interesting point. Jeffrey Epstein, see how we want to put this. He worked at Bear Stearns, formed his own company called International Assets Group to recover loan debts and assets of wealthy people that were held in cryptic offshore bank accounts. And then with that, it turns out that he hooked up with a few other people, one of which is Adnan Khashoggi, which for recent historians remember that he is a Saudi Arabian individual, and he was worked with the CIA, and he was a gun runner. And he worked with, that's right, Jeffrey Epstein. Now, the real shock, get ready for this one. Does anybody remember the Vietnam War? Well, if you remember the Vietnam War, you might remember there was this little issue concerning an ongoing illicit drug trade run by Air America. That's right, Air America, which was owned by the CIA, as we have learned. So what happens here? Jeffrey Epstein was the broker who arranged for the sale and renaming of Air America to another company, and he's not involved with the CIA? I'm having a problem with that. Anyway, this article goes on with other examples like that, so you definitely got to check it out. See if there's another point. Yeah, so there's that. Meantime, General Flynn is acting as the conscience, not that President Trump needs one, but he's acting as the loud conscience of President Trump. And just to use the key phrase, the Epstein scandal isn't going away, and it must be addressed head on. So that's the quote from General Flynn. And I couldn't agree with him more, okay? Because this other stuff is just it's gonna ruin support. It's what an unholy mess that's coming if he keeps doing what he's doing here. One issue is whether or not there should be a special prosecutor. We'll let that hang in the air for now. But then also Roger Stone, who spoke at a conference recently, proposed what I think is a very sound approach, which was, how about releasing the grand jury testimony from Trump's first term, and even more important, release the search warrants, all the search warrants that were issued against Jeffrey Epstein. These would certainly be well within President Trump's purview. So I think Roger Stone is making a very good suggestion. Now, the showstopper for the Epstein stuff, Ghislaine Maxwell is willing to testify before Congress, and she wants to lay out the truth. Now, the thing that's weird in this article is they claim that no one's ever asked her, and no one's ever asked her for anything, and no one's asked her to testify. It's like she's been ignored. It's insane. So now we have this floating. Ghislaine Maxwell could testify before Congress. I think that's a good idea, so long as we get to keep her alive long enough. Okay, that's Epstein for now. Oh wait, one other thing. I'm sorry, I forgot. So I don't know if you saw the short that I put up last week, but I had a diagram, and I was suggesting in that diagram that there were connections between Jeffrey Epstein and both the CIA and Mossad. All right, so that would suggest that Mossad and CIA work together somehow. Does that seem so improbable, ladies and gentlemen? I need to remind you that there's a little something called Five Eyes. If you don't know what Five Eyes is, do you know what Five Eyes is, Eric? Oh, okay, so Five Eyes is a collaboration or a consortium of the five intelligence agencies in English-speaking countries, if that's the right way to put it. So that would be New Zealand, Australia, England, America, and Canada. All five of those intelligence agencies supposedly have a deal where they share a lot of information with each other. So what am I supposed to think? If you have Five Eyes as a foundation for collaboration between intelligence agencies from different countries, then why not Mossad? Okay? And or, given the nature of Five Eyes, I would be surprised if Mossad was not plugged in some way. Okay? A number of those other intelligence agencies certainly do have an interest about what goes on in the Mideast. So their natural recourse is to turn to Mossad. Just saying. Okay, so, oh, by the way, so folks from Mossad came out and said, what? No way. Epstein didn't have, or the quote is, the accusation that Jeffrey Epstein somehow worked for Israel or Mossad running a blackmail ring is categorically and totally false. I wish to remind you of a certain saying from Otto Bismarck. Okay, now that it's been officially denied, we know it's officially true. How do you like them apples? All right, so that's Jeffrey Epstein. Now I need to move on to other items. So those are the big news items, but I want to touch on another one here. All you silver fans out there who'd like to buy and sell silver will remember there have been a number of times in the last 30 or 40 years where some really arrogant people actually try to corner the silver market. Some of you may remember back in the 70s, the Hunt brothers. Remember the Hunt brothers? Kind of, yeah, they were in the oil business. And yeah, so they actually had the audacity to try and corner the silver market. There was somebody else who tried it before them, back in the 20s or 30s. Didn't work. Well, they decided to try it. Didn't work. You'd think they'd learn by now. So now, some unnamed person sold 483 million ounces of silver in 1 hour. Okay, that represents, what is it, 57% of the annual mine supply of silver. 483 million ounces. So what happens when you flood the market with something? That's right, the price goes down. So it was, unless this gentleman was shorting silver, it would not have been in his interest to do that. So what the heck is going on here? Well, we'd like to know. And we'll stay tuned, okay? You can only, and you know, Alex Jones had a piece several months ago where he pointed out that you've had a number of wealthy investors who have constantly suppressed the price of silver. And the notion is, as the price of gold goes up, it's just going to get harder and harder to do it. So I think this is a desperation move where you're selling the equivalent of 57% of the production of silver into the market in 1 hour. Dude, after that you've shot your wad. Then what? You know? Yeah, so there's more on it. Check it out. Now, this is odd. All right, give me a minute here, all right? Oh, give me a minute. Da-da-da. Okay, the title of the article is America Must Fight Like an Insurgent to Defeat Communist China. So this is by a person who I really respect as a columnist. His name is Daniel Green. He does great stuff. The problem here is that he sees China as a growing threat. Now, I need to remind you that I said that China did announce several years ago that they put themselves on a war footing. Okay, so the bulk of their economy is supposed to be devoted to producing weapons and equipment and the support things needed to actually prosecute a war. All right. There's a problem. So he's saying we have to adapt to the size of the China threat. First problem, Mr. Green, the Chinese population is not growing, and they're getting older. So while they can field a very large military, the demographic support for that is getting weaker and weaker. So maybe I have a question about that. The other part is that you had this project, these academics collected satellite data, night sky satellite data, looking at different countries, drawing a correlation between the amount of light produced at night and their level of economic activity. Well, they basically found that when they looked at the light production for China, the amount corresponded to economic activity only 2/3 of what China was claiming. All right, so if there's any basis for this, it's just another suggestion that China is not everything that we think it is. So you have to also wonder, to what extent can China keep pushing itself around the world militarily? They aren't unlimited in their resources either, just saying. And then there's a fair question about their capabilities to begin with. They've never fought a war, so how are they going to know how to prosecute a war? And yeah, I mean, on the other hand, it's true. They run these drills, and they are very methodical, especially in the way they're slowly trying to strangle Taiwan. But it's an interesting idea. Does it make sense for America to act like an insurgent to defeat communist China? You know, military doctrine may already be moving in that direction. So I just wanted to share that with you. All right, now I think this, I always like to put up a little something about science, and I think this is cool. The Milky Way may be surrounded by 100 or so hidden galaxies. Now they call these hidden galaxies also satellite galaxies. And how they happen to be characterized that way is anybody's guess. But you have to understand that that which constitutes astronomy has undergone a dramatic change in the last 10 or 15 years. So now you have a theory. It's called the lambda cold dark matter theory, which basically subdivides what is considered to be the dark known universe into 3 parts. And they are 5% of visible energy, 25% cold dark matter, and 70% dark energy. So I don't know, maybe we're going to find some stuff in that dark energy that's not what we expected. I'm just saying. So this is really cool, and the link is up. You got to go check it out. Now, Tina Peters. I have not heard enough about what's going on with Tina Peters. We know that there's several things in process. Nothing's coming of it. Yeah. So I just want to throw out, there is another bad actor in this story. You may remember her name. She's Jenna Griswold. She's the current Secretary of State who basically replaced Tina Peters. And there was a little kerfluffle, so I put up this article from October, and everything is not quite as it seems. It never is. But this is an interview with Jenna Griswold over the passwords that she accidentally put on their website. She denies that it was of any significance. She makes her case, but I think we have other things to consider. Yes. So it's there for you to read. Meantime, food additive of the week. Aspartame. Oh my goodness, aspartame. I've never been a fan of aspartame. And here's the molecule. So it kind of looks fancy, but it's a peptide, okay? As a peptide, it's only, did that come up okay? Okay, so as a peptide, it's only 2 amino acids. Phenylalanine and what was the other one? So stupid of me, trying to remember what it is. Okay, in any event, the heart of this whole thing is that they've studied it a lot, and they're still equivocating over what constitutes a serious threat by aspartame. There is a suggestion that if you take too much aspartame, the risk of carcinogenicity goes up. And of course, the other sick joke is that aspartame chews little holes in your brain. And the thing is, when you think of a peptide that's only 2 amino acids, there would be a wide range of biochemical reactions that could take place in the brain. Something worth considering. So we put those links up for you for that. Oh, by the way, from the Liars, Pants on Fire department, we have a report. That would be Biden saying he made clemency decisions that were recorded with the auto pen. So the New York Times had this in-depth piece where they're basically trying to cover for him. And I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we're not buying it. We are not buying it. So we want that investigation into the AutoPen scandal to proceed, and we want all the facts as to what happened. And I just got two other quick pieces here. Please note, a report, U.S. obesity-related cancer deaths have more than tripled. Okay, this warning has been out for a very long time for people who are suffering from obesity. Your risk of cancer is high, and it's getting higher. Okay, so there's that for you to check. And here we thought we had it under control with respect to all this disinformation and censorship crap. Well, the UN has launched a new global task force to, quote, control disinformation. In other words, they're upset. They are losing control of what they expect their narrative to be. I'm sorry, but there's an old saying, United Nations. The old saying is, the truth will out. So you can disinform all you want, but at some point, the truth will out. And on that happy note, see you next week.